In this video, I'll show you how I painted this apple using Derwent Inktense Pencils, along with a few errors along the way. I'll explain to you why art doesn't have to be perfect, and I'll show you my art hack right at the end on how I redeemed myself. Let's get into it. So I begin by sketching out my drawing like this with nice clean edges, and you can see that I'm swatching out the colours on my Inktense pencils on a piece of paper on the side here. I will list all the materials that I'm using in this video in the description box underneath, so if you do want to join in, you can slow the video down or pause it whenever you want to and join in with me. I really love these Derwent water pens, and in this demo I will show you how I use them to create fine washes to start with in the way that you would kind of use watercolour, but these are much more buildable. So if you're used to watercolour lifting off the page, then maybe try these as an alternative, because they are buildable and once they're dry they won't lift off in the way that watercolour does. So I start by using a really watery mix of these colours here. The green you see at the top is apple green, along with bark, which is the colour that I've painted on the side of the apple. Now that might seem like a strange colour to put on an apple, but it's all about creating illusion and building up the colours slowly so that they can create depth and form. Now these first washes are all about putting our base tones in the way that we would with watercolour. Very similar method of applying the pigment, but as I said, watercolour will lift off sometimes when it's dry if you put on too many layers, but with these they don't go anywhere once they're dry. So if you've struggled with watercolour in the past, then maybe give these a try. So you can see that I'm using my water brush to apply the colour onto the paper, and once it's dry I'll carry on building up my layers like this. The two colours that you see swatched at the top there are apple green at the very top, and the colour next to it is felt green. Working down we have leaf green, then we have sienna gold, willow and bark. So it's important that you let each layer dry before applying the next, but once it's dry, as I said, you can carry on building up your colours. You can see me here painting with that bark colour negatively around the underside of this leaf, in the way that I would with watercolour, dropping it in wet here to apply that natural blur that you get with watercolour and just building it up. Now, I did make a little mistake here. You can see that I went slightly outside the pencil line, and it being Derwent, it's permanent, so I couldn't lift it off. So it's a matter of disguising that line as I work through. So what I decided to do is just extend that line slightly and start to build up around it, hoping that nobody would notice. Here you can see me using sienna gold, and again, just bringing that over the apple like this with my small size water brush, just giving it a really soft squeeze just to get that water out. We don't want to flood the apple with too much water, otherwise it will just bloom in the way that watercolour does. These little water brushes are great to use, and you can see that I'm using the Inktense pencils here in a slightly different way. This time I've applied them straight onto the paper like this, in the way that you would use a traditional pencil. And I'm wetting it with a water brush just to activate it and spread that colour around. You can see at this point how light the colours are, but all I'm doing at this stage is just merely giving myself a guide as to where I'm going to build the stronger colours later on. All of the materials I'm going to be using today, including the little palette that you see there on the right, I'll put in the description box underneath this video, including the paper that I've chosen to use. So you can see just lifting off that colour with the brush and just painting it on in the way that you would with watercolour. But as I said, so much easier to handle because you don't get that lift off and it's difficult to overwork. So this time I'm just kind of making up some random patterns and negatively painting around some veins. Negative painting just means that you're painting around a shape to create that shape. So once again, just putting some gentle pressure on that water brush and applying that paint like this. And the same on the other side, I'm just picking up the felt green here and just applying it with that water brush. You can get a really fine point with these water brushes. They're really easy to use. So all of the materials that I'm going to be using today I will put in the description box along with all my social media links. Now, if you do want to join in with this tutorial, I'll provide you with a free outline to trace from, and if you want to have access to that, all you need to do is wait right until the end of this video and you can screenshot it and print it out that way if you want to trace it down. You can see me here adding the sienna gold straight onto the paper, but unfortunately, because the paper wasn't dry, notice how that pencil has stuck to the paper. This has formed an unsightly mark there, and you can see that no matter how much I go over it with my water brush, those lines are still in place. And the only way around that problem is to let the whole thing dry completely and then go over it again. I'm using a plain water glaze to go over the leaf, and this will unify all the colours. It'll give all those hard edges a soft blur, and by doing this it unifies the colours without them moving around too much, but it does mean that I have to let it dry completely before I start building up my darker tones later on. It's super important that you let this dry, because if you don't, you'll get the same problem as I did there with that pencil. So everything's dry on the apple, so you can see me using a mixture of sienna gold and the felt green there and activating it with water with the water brush. At this point, I did feel that the outside edge of my apple had become a little bit greasy. Now, we all have natural oils on our skin, and sometimes those oils can transfer onto the paper, and I think that's what's happened here. As I said, art doesn't have to be perfect, it's all about enjoying the process. I guess in the past I would have just ditched this painting and decided to start again, but I thought I would carry on regardless, enjoy the process and have fun with it and share it with you. So you can see that even a professional artist sometimes makes mistakes too. It's all okay and we can all just have fun. I'm picking up the pigment. This is bark, and I've squeezed a tiny bit into my little palette there. I wanted the outside edge of this apple to have a sort of a different colour somehow, and we're using a little bit of artistic license here. I did use a photograph of an apple, which I haven't put up this week because I used a lot of artistic license on this one, so it turned out to be not like the photograph. So I decided not to post up the photograph for this tutorial, just the outline for you to trace down at the end, because as I said, it didn't look anything like it, so there didn't really seem much point. But for all of our tutorials here on YouTube, we do provide you with a reference photograph and a line drawing to work from. And as I said, to have access to all of those, you can join our Facebook group, which I will link along with all my other social media links in the description box underneath this video. So you can see how I'm building up these colours, and I have sped this video up a little bit for you, but you can slow it down if you want to on YouTube. Just by pressing the little button on the side there, you can slow it down so that you can join in. Here we have my eradicator brush. Now, once again, trying to redeem myself, I'm using this dry just to pick it up some and trying to lift out some of that pigment there, but you can see with little success because the paper had become slightly damaged. So going back to the leaf, I do feel that it needs a bit more drama, so this time I'm adding a bit of the leaf green and felt green, mixing them up as I work through along with a little bit of that sienna gold, and I'm going to activate that with a water brush in the moment. So gently using this light touch to put those colours onto the paper. Now, as I said earlier on, when you do this, it's really important that your paper is dry, because if your paper is even the slightest bit damp, this will stick to the paper and cause those hard lines. Activating that ink with a water brush and blending them through. You can see at this point that it really has started to bring this painting to life and give it a bit more drama and a bit more definition. So it's by building up your colours slowly in the way that you would with watercolour that you get this lovely result. We have over 100 free tutorials here on our YouTube channel, and we launch brand new content every Tuesday. And if this is something that interests you, then please consider subscribing to my channel and hitting that bell notification so that you'll be notified when I upload new content and you can join in with me. If you are enjoying this video, I would ask you please to give me a like, a nice big thumbs up. It's a way of letting YouTube know that you're enjoying my content, and it shows it to more people, which means that I can carry on creating these tutorials for you. So please give it a big thumbs up. It really does help to support me. And speaking of supporting me, if botanical painting is your thing and you'd like to create more in-depth tutorials and learn how to paint botanicals, then we do have a Patreon where we launch brand new painting tutorial every month that you won't find here on YouTube. They are exclusive to my patrons and they are full lengths. In case this is something that interests you, let's just take a look. If you love botanical painting and want to know more, then you may want to join our Patreon. We have different membership levels so that you can take your botanical painting to the next level. With our Clematis level, you will have a full-length, in-depth tutorial every month, and if you'd like to make even more progress, then check out our Rose level, where we now have a mentorship offering feedback to help you grow. You won't find any of our Patreon tutorials here on YouTube, and you can cancel your membership at any time. So if you want to take your botanical painting to the next level, then take a look. I'll put the link in the description underneath this video. Okay, so as you can see, I'm adding bark now to the top part of the leaf here because I felt that it was looking too flat with just a lot of green on that leaf. It's too green and I felt it needed toning down. So by adding the bark colour that you can see here, along with that tiny bit of leaf green, it does tone down that colour quite a bit. So if you don't have Inktense pencils, you can also join in with watercolour if you want to. I did feel this was looking a little bit too green still, so I'm carrying on building up those colours. At this point I decided to add some purple. Now this might seem a little bit strange, but I felt that this apple was looking too flat and it needed a little bit of something. And since I'm not working from a photograph today, I decided to be a little bit more creative and add some of this purple tone to the outside edge. For some reason I felt that it works and it gives it that sort of sense of it being a bit more three-dimensional rather than the flat green colour that I had on to start with. Yes, it's a little bit dramatic, but it's all about artistic license and having fun, and as I said at the start of this video, sometimes art doesn't have to be perfect, it can just be enjoyed, and I was definitely having fun with this one. Blending in those colours, but notice how you can build up the colours with this paint. Blending it in and merging it with that water brush. The two water brushes that I'm using, one is a large and one is a small. That's all I know because you buy them in a pack of 4, which I will link in the description box underneath. Once again, trying to redeem myself by applying these colours and building up my washes as I go through, adding some of the yellow tone and some of that bark pencil to the bottom section there, letting it gently bleed into that wet paint. You can see if you look closely, and I'm not going to hide it, that I have gone outside the lines a little bit here and there. Now, this is something that I tried to disguise by going over that line, but in the end I decided that it wouldn't work, and so I'm going to carry on going regardless. This time I'm going to apply the paint in a different way. So using my Inktense pencils almost in the way as I would with a paint palette, you can see me here just using my water brush and taking the pigment directly from the point of the pencil, in the way that you would perhaps use a watercolour pan. By applying it this way, you can see that the colours are much stronger. Of course, it is important once more to make sure that your paint is dry before you do this to get the level of pigment payoff that you want. Notice how I'm just taking a tiny bit of pigment and applying it with the tip of my brush like this. This way you have full control over the amount of pigment that you apply onto your paper, creating more drama and more of a darker effect. And you can just carry on building up these colours until you get the depth of colour that you want. If you've tried Inktense pencils before and you're a watercolour painter, how did you find them? Let me know in the comments below whether you find them easier to use or whether you struggle with them a little bit. It seems to be a bit of a mixed bag. I'm picking up the pigment from the nib as before and just adding a little bit of texture here and there. This is with Sienna Gold, straight from the pencil with that water brush, and then I'm going to add a tiny bit of the willow just to give it a little bit more definition here and there. I didn't want this colour to be flat. I'm just patting in that colour just on certain areas just to make it look a little bit more, just give it a bit more texture. So do let me know if you've tried Inktense before and how you got on with them. Drop it in the comments below and let me know what you think. I really love them. You can see here that I'm just adding a tiny bit more willow to the top of that leaf because I felt it was looking, once again, a little bit too green. Picking it up from the pencil and just outlining some of the areas on the top of that leaf. This is one of my favourite things to use, is one of my hacks that I was talking about at the start of this video. This is Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, and it is incredible for adding things like highlights or detail or anything like that if you've got a tiny bit of highlight to add in to any of your paintings. But here, this is how I kind of salvage this apple a little bit. What I've done is I've mixed a tiny bit of Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White with some water, and I've added that little highlight on the left there. But by mixing it with some water and taking it to the outside edge on the right hand side of this apple where I've applied the bark colour and the purple colour, I felt that this gave it more of a disappearing edge. So all I'm doing is applying a watered down version of the Dr. P.H. Martin's like this and blending it in. It gives it a much softer, much more realistic look, and I already felt that it was making a big difference, so I continued to do this. And I did try to solve the problem of that outside edge a little bit with more of it there, as you can see me doing, just carrying on the process and dropping in that ink and just blending it out. And you can see how much softer that looks. It looks like the light is reflecting on the side of that apple. If Inktense pencil tutorials are something that interests you, I will put a playlist at the end of this video. Here's the finished piece. Let me know what you think.